Welcome to Common Ground, conversations exploring the stories and perspectives of people building the UK India corridor. My name is Lakshmi Kaul, and I'm bringing you this UK India series for global order. For years, the world looked at China as a factory of the world. But today, global brands are increasingly looking at India not just for labor, but for scale, sustainability, innovation, and resilience. My guest today is someone who has played pivotal roles from shaping international trade conversations in both India and UK to now leading corporate affairs and strategic communications at Arvind Ltd. He has had a front row seat to how governments, industry, institutions actually work together behind the scenes. He's a policy strategist, mentor, academic, columnist, and one of the most influential voices in the UK India corridor today. We're going to unpack what businesses often misunderstand about government relations, why strategic communications is now a boardroom issue, and how India's rise is changing the global business conversation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Param Shah to Common Ground. Hi, Param. Welcome.
Hi, Lakshmi. Thank you for having me here. It's good to connect and talk about the topics that are close to your and my heart.
I should have said Kemcho. That's the only Gujarati that I know.
I think it's time for the world to now learn Hindi and Gujarati and some of the Indian dialects.
Absolutely right. And who better to teach than you and our dear Prime Minister?
Absolutely.
So, Param, you began your career in academia before then moving into industry and policy. And then, all this switch from teaching, it's usually the other way around. I'm curious to know, how did teaching and research shape the way that you understand business leadership today?
Actually, teaching came quite naturally to me. I come from a family of academics. My parents were academics. My sisters, they're academics as well. So it was quite natural for me, or you could call me a nepo kid if you want to. That's what got into me, and what started as a way to get pocket money by teaching young kids while I was in junior college, to then making it a profession, because I thought it would be nice to do something that I liked. So that's what happened. And to be honest, what I've realized over the years is academia teaches you intellectual discipline, curiosity, and long term thinking. Teaching forces clarity. If you cannot explain something simply, you probably do not understand it deeply yourselves. Research develops you for evidence-based decision making instead of reactionary leadership. And today's leaders need to interpret complexities and not just manage operations. So, if I have to put it crisply, it actually trained me to ask better questions before rushing to answers. And in business and policy, that ability becomes extremely valuable, because the most important decision today sits at the intersection of economics, technology, regulations, and society.
That brings me to your qualifications, which is pretty much everything that is under the sun. So you hold qualifications across marketing, law, commerce, intellectual property. I'm not sure if I'm leaving anything out. And that's a very rare combination. I want to know why. And then I want to know, do you think future leaders need to become more interdisciplinary to remain relevant? First of all, tell me why all these different qualifications.
Right. So, as I like to say, and this is something that I keep cracking a joke on, that you tend to master what you hate the most. I remember my first set of master's exams, I was actually counting papers. And when I wrote my last examination, I was like, that's it. I'm not writing any more exams ever in my life. And like they say never. And what happened was, over the years, as I progressed further in my career, I realized that I would want to learn more before practicing. And that's what I kept doing. I finished my PhD as recently as about 9 years ago, before I moved to the UK. And I'm still in look for a course, probably an executive master's on AI and governance, which is the newfound love in my life, which is something that I've been learning more and more about. So that's how, over the years, I kept learning more. And in terms of your question about the future leaders, I think absolutely the era of siloed leadership is ending. A CEO today may need to understand technology, policy, sustainability regulations, brand strategy, supply chains, intellectual property, and all of this often simultaneously. That's where, now is an era where a generalist with strategic depth becomes very important. And interdisciplinary thinking improves your resilience and adaptability and helps you to move swiftly in an ever changing world. I think it is important for us to be a constant learner, a lifelong learner, and probably immediately adapt and learn new trades, tricks, and move further in life.
And also, I suppose problem solving does entail interdisciplinary understanding or at least orientation to be able to address the big problems that we're dealing with within corporate or outside of it. So,
Absolutely.
and you've been at the heart of government relations pretty much all your career, if I know correctly. In reality, people within the business segment still think that it's all about lobbying. Does strategic engagement with government really help? And what does it actually look like?
So, strategic engagements or government engagements is all about trust, credibility, and alignment with the priorities that the nation has. Good policy engagement is usually data driven and solution oriented. You don't go to government and engage with them asking for favors. It is about helping policymakers solve real economic and societal challenges while aligning, of course, your business growth and national priority as well. It's not always transactional, it's always relationship based and institutional building. So you need to engage more seriously with uh, the government and contribute constructively to the economic outcome. And I think that helps you get your issues solved as much as the problems of the society at large.
And you've been involved in, government affairs both in the UK and India. What would you say is the contrast or similarity between the two countries within that space?
I think the similarities, if I put it first, both the governments on both the sides are open to listen. They would want to learn and understand what's working, what's not working for you. And that we've seen, because you also worked on both sides of the pond and you know how it is that gone are the days where the government would make something in their own offices and just the file would come in. One fine day, an announcement comes in. There's quite a lot of consultation that happens at various levels. Of course, the differences that I see is the involvement of academic institutions in policy making and research institutions in policymaking is quite detailed and much more involved in the UK as compared to India. Especially, I know academic institutions are involved in India as well, but then the interaction between business, academia, and government together. I remember being in a room multiple times in the UK with policymakers, academicians, and ourselves representing the policy issue and discussing it, deliberating it, and openly then challenging each other as well. Now, that probably is something that I see as a gap. The government is consulting, but probably consulting separately. And it would be nice to be working together, thereby the interests are aligned and the process is much more crisp.
Absolutely. And it helps understand the challenges in both the worlds and bringing them together. And that's why perhaps UK has more cutting edge research emerging, So very, very well made point there. You're now in manufacturing. Would you say that it is finally India's moment in a global apparel manufacturing? And has the China plus one strategy benefited India at all or yet? Is it more hype than reality, Param?
To be honest, this is the time for India when it comes to garmenting and apparel manufacturing. Thankfully, to all the FTAs that are announced and signed and now being delivered by the government of India, it's put us at a level playing field with our neighbors and with the South Asian countries with whom we compete usually. It's a low margin business. It's a high volume, low margin business, and you can't be working in an atmosphere or competing in an atmosphere where the difference is 1:26. Now it's a level playing field with the tariffs almost at nil. We can now look at being equally competitive. Economies of scale will definitely come, but I think there's a huge still gap in the requirement or demand of more businesses to come in. Now what I see is there's a huge gap between the large players in the business, so the top five, which is 1,000 crore plus, and the SMEs, there's a huge gap. There's nothing in between. So that gap is something which is important for us to fill up, get more medium-sized garment manufacturers, help them, train them. And I think it's not just the job of the government, but also the job of businesses themselves to handhold fellow businessmen and then help them grow. And that's how we should be able to make a dent in the global apparel market.
And do you think China still rules that middle space? Because there's a very strong dependability on China still with technology, advanced kind of materials and things like that within manufacturing of apparel.
See, China definitely is quite a factor to deal with, but that does not make us any less competitive, because we are now also working with, in some cases with China, in some cases with Italy and others who have the equipments, who have the manufacturing capabilities. Germany, for example, has a lot of apparel manufacturing machinery that comes from there. So textiles and apparels, I think India definitely has a huge role to play in this market. At this point, our share is quite low in the global market, but that does not mean that we cannot grow. We can grow. And to be honest, for this particular sector, it's not just China that we're looking at. We're looking at other Southeast Asian countries that we are competing with as well. But like I said, now that we are at a level playing field, the market's much more open. If a brand is looking for a reliable strategic partner who sources and manufactures sustainably, I think the answer is India.
The growing consumer market within India, I mean, it's always of interest to the world as well. That is something that attracts every business around the world.
Absolutely. India is at this point not just a growing economy from a talent and a manufacturing point of view, but also from a consumer market point of view. Many global companies are looking at India from that perspective as well. But of course, it's not just a primary. While we look at India, and a lot of global companies look at India primarily as a consumer market, India now increasingly should be understood as a strategic innovation, talent, manufacturing, and digital governance partner.
Yeah, I mean, it has much, much more to offer than what, meets the eye. Talking about consumers, in India or elsewhere, the average consumer sees fashion through storefronts or actually more through social media. And very few actually would understand the complexity behind making one garment at scale. So, what would you say are the biggest operational challenges in running an apparel manufacturing business at scale in India?
See, getting scale is not a challenge at this point of time. The biggest challenge, of course, is getting manpower. What happens is there is a huge gap between the demand for manpower and the supply as well. And interestingly, over the generations, we've seen that women are excellent when it comes to apparel manufacturing. Globally, this is true. Now, what's happening is in India, there is socio-cultural issue about women working, and especially in the rural areas. Now, that's where we need to look at how do we get more women engaged in manufacturing. For example, at Arvind, we run a program called Arvind Akriti, as we call it. And it's an excellent program, and we're now trying to scale it up with, in different parts of India where we are present, and see how we can also help other businesses adapt it. In fact, our vice chairman spoke about it yesterday. um, the program's very simple. What we're doing is we are moving away from worker coming in daily to the factory from his home to look at dormitory led model. A lot of global giants or even countries that have done well in manufacturing, that's the model that they've gone with, where you walk to work and you stay in a premise which is very close to the factory itself, which is a second home for you. And if you're not working, you also tend to be trained for your own career enrichment. So the program that we run is pretty simple. What we do is we're looking at getting women or tribal girls in the age group of 18 to 25 to come and work with us. When they come, right from their health parameters checkup to the educational check, we look at it, and then we help them not just train for manufacturing, but also take care of their health, and also help them, do formal education through night schools, through distant education, and also help them prepare for competitive exams, where they could probably at the end of the tenure with us, which is a natural iteration as we call it, they would have done three things. One, they would have gained a degree. Two, they would have probably transitioned from a blue collar job to a white collar job, which is quite a huge step in empowering women. And most importantly, at the end of the term with us, they would have accumulated a certain amount which would be useful for them in their own future and put them in an equal pedestal when it comes to talking to their male counterparts. Or if I put it very simply, in the typical Indian rural setup, she's got her Kanyadan, as we call it, whereby she can now talk to her counterpart or the future partner saying, okay, this is what I'm bringing into the marriage. What is it that you get? Right? So this is true empowerment in all senses. And I was so happy to see what, when I came to this company and I saw the kind of work we are doing and the scale at which we are now wanting to take it. Currently we're doing few hundreds. We want to do few thousands and more. And we're talking openly about it. The only reason we are talking about it is it's not something that is intellectual property. It's just a simple formula that's cracked for us and probably could crack for other sectors as well.
It's the invisible workforce that companies have been shying away from, tapping into. It's the other half of the population that has got easily missed out because it's just not traditionally what has been looked at. So great initiative there. Looking at the overall workforce and their productivity with technology, coming in, do you have to up your staff regularly? What are the ways in which you keep up with these trends and changes?
See, one of the key things at our group of companies, as we call it, because Arvind Limited is now moved right from being a textile major to now into multiple businesses, 8 businesses ranging from textiles to garmenting to engineering, telecom, real estate, and beyond. One of the key things that's at the root of the ethos of this company is constant learning. And this constant learning is not just at the level of workers, but also all the way up to the vice chairmen of the companies themselves. So 2 weeks ago, we were all in a room for 2 days in a week. We spent about 6 to 8 hours a day talking about how do you use AI for effective management, understanding various AI models. How do you use it? How do you not use it? Because we don't realize, but everything that you tell AI is going to the cloud and it's going to someone else's server. So you giving data which is quite open at the end of the day. So you may not want to do certain things. So I think what I'm trying to put here is that the company puts a lot of effort in training people, developing more skills, even at the worker level. As we speak, last month we had some of our girls at the plant in Ranchi who had gone to Bangalore for learning how to work on a new machine and thereby training them further. So why did I mention these examples is to tell you the range of training and development that happens in the company. And we constantly look at this. We constantly talk to each other at various levels, cross functions, and see, okay, here's a gap. Or for example, I was approached by one of the teams saying, hey, can your team talk to my team and tell them about how does policy making work? And then we could contribute and give you more inputs from what would be good for the business. And then you could go and talk to the policymakers. Now, this is what is constant learning, as we call it. No one's shying away in reaching out to other teams. Why always go to a college or why always go to a trainer? You could probably learn something from your own colleagues. So that's how the culture's been within the organization, where we openly talk to our colleagues and say, hey, can you talk more about this and tell my team and train our teams to learn more about it?
Fascinating. Very, very fascinating. Param, you work with the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FICCI, in both India and UK for many years. What separates companies that successfully influence policy conversations from those who perhaps remain the outsiders in that conversation?
So there's one simple success mantra, as I call it. It's invest in a long-term relationship and not a episodic outreach. That's one line brief, which usually when a lot of companies reach out to me talking about UK or India, because I get reached out by companies from both the sides, asking about the markets, asking how do we want to go about it. And I keep telling them that the companies that shape policy conversations are usually those that slowly and consistently, and not only when they need something, but when they can contribute meaningfully to a broader economic thinking, understand the policy timing and the institutional process, and then approach government. I think those companies have actually done well as compared to companies that go to the government saying, hey, I have a problem, can you help? So that's something that will separate companies that are successful in influencing policy as compared to, outsiders.
Well said. And it's more partnership that also the governments across, not just at the center, but also in different, regional governments are also looking at that partnership. And therefore, they are increasingly, I think, expecting businesses to contribute beyond profit. So, issues like sustainability, skilling, employment, social cohesion, are corporations, do you think, prepared for that shift? Are they comfortable with that shift from the government being so proactive?
I think gone are the days where businesses used to function in isolation or be under a rock, completely ignoring what's going around them, right? And more so with so much of social media, so much of public scrutiny that goes on, right? You need to be a business that no longer operates as an isolated economic entity. Government, consumers, even investors are now expecting corporations or businesses to contribute to national resilience, social mobility, sustainability. So it is important now that businesses do actually work hand in hand with policymakers and not only look at profits, but also look at investing in ESG. Of course, ESG is also involving from reporting to operational accountability, right? So India now has a unique opportunity because inclusive growth is central in its developmental story. And businesses should now be working more closely with the government to contribute towards it as well.
And that perhaps will help improve the ease of doing business, ratings that attracts in turn foreign investments and partnerships as well.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
a win-win kind of partnership that the governments are trying to advocate for. Now, India is often described as the world's next growth engine. I suspect it might be the current growth engine already, not the next one. But from your perspective, what are international businesses still not understanding about India?
So every time I hear that India is a 1.4, 1.5 trillion, billion population, this is the population size, this is the market size, I laugh in my head. For a simple reason, you don't know the Indian market then. You don't know the Indian consumer then. Depending upon what brand you are. Let's take an example of a high-end brand from the West wanting to look at India as a market. If you look at that number, you are absolutely miscalculating, right? You are looking at the creamy layer, the aspirational middle class, as was told by someone previously. So these are the kind of things that make me wonder, why do businesses make this mistake? India is not just a market. India is United States of India, as we call it. These are separate markets within a large subcontinent. Also, when you look at India as a market, it again is a strategic mistake. You should look at it becoming your strategic capability hub, right? If you are looking at India as a customer market, you are grossly underestimating India's institutional maturity, and not to mention the digital infrastructure that India has now, right? So, like I said earlier, it's not just one homogeneous market, it's multiple economies in one. And more importantly, I see a lot of business come in and say, hey, these are our numbers, second year this, third year this, fourth year this. And it's like, again, this is another mistake you're making. You should be patient and look at localization as well, right? There are so many brands that I can talk of which have localized to the extent that they've now become more of an Indian brand than foreign brand. 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, or rather at times 10 out of 10 people, you ask them about Bata and they say, yeah, that's an Indian company, right? It's not an Indian company, right? Or for global fast food giant to open up a all vegetarian outlet serving food catering to certain religions. Now that's localization. Now you will have to go that deep. And in India, like I said earlier, at the cost of repeating, India rewards long-term commitments, and it'll pay off if you come to market with these things in your mind.
Obviously, it's all relationship driven. We are very emotional people, so we like to build that relationship and nurture it and then eventually protect it at all costs. JCB is another great story. I mean, they don't just manufacture for India, but they manufacture for the world. They decided long time ago that they're going to manufacture here in India, and they're
Correct.
very happy with that decision because it's their productivity is much higher
Absolutely.
to the world. So, great example. Let's talk about your favorite subject currently. And I suspect you already said you're looking for a course within that domain. So, AI and future tech is almost a way of life for most sectors today. There's a need, obviously, for adoption, adaptability, building more resilient structures and systems. What is your assessment of the governance of this change in the form of AI?
So this is, like you said, something very close to my heart. This what started again. It started as something that intrigued me a few years ago, which took me to LSC to do a summer course on AI governance and ethics. Got me glued into this subject. Then it was not definitely the AI boom and the talk around AI that got me into this. It was probably my inquisitiveness about AI and governance that got me into this, and a lot of issues around AI. Interestingly, while I was doing the course, I came across the AI winters. And recently, I was reading an article that is the AI boom about to end? Or is the bubble busting? And that's when I could relate to that article that I read a few years ago about the AI winter. And what I realized is, yes, there have been failed attempts at AI in the past as well, but this time it's much more different. It's not just the monies that have gone behind this, but also the usage and the understanding of the subject. However, the issues around governance, like I said, earlier when I was talking to you about people still not understanding what to and what not to. And see, this is quite a powerful tech that we are handing over to young kids. And there are studies which talk about usage of brain and dependence on AI and how your brain shrinks the more you use AI and less you apply your brain yourselves. Right now, a lot of these things all put together do worry me at times, and then that's when I think about it. And of course, the age old issues around AI about data biases, hallucination, all of those, of course, on the technical side do worry me, but also on a larger scale, when we are talking of a country like India where you are wanting to give AI to every individual in that smartphone that they have, I think it's important for us to get the governance of it right, get the policies around it right. We can't, as a globe, not just India, look at how we dealt with the internet. The internet came and then we're now regulating it. But now it's an unruly horse. So AI, I think it's a huge opportunity for all the countries in the world to first look at getting your policies in right about AI. Of course, it can't be, cast in stone. It can't be something that can um, not just be changed. You'll have to evolve those policies. But I think this time, let's not get it wrong in terms of what we did with internet. We should get the policy and the governance right, and then probably look at upscaling and giving AI in the hands of everyone.
Absolutely. And it's a chicken and egg when it comes to AI because you need to input the data. That's what will
Absolutely.
drive the algorithm. So the temptation is to add more information to it so that it can give you more accurate results. Now, what kind of information, how much, where does it sit? Where is it stored? Who is using it? Who has access to it? Who is monitoring it? Is it localized? Is it globalized? Is it everybody's business? It's all so complicated. And then in all of this, then you have hybrid models of working and thinking. Schools are even like, children, they are at a primary or pre-primary level also doing hybrid education. And it's very baffling. I'm personally a big campaigner of opting for a slow life. And that kind of is a conversation that is almost alien, but picking up in, rooms where people are beginning to get worried about this whole digital explosion that's happening in their day to day life. It's fascinating. We'll watch this space.
If I tell you one interesting anecdote that our trainer, when I mentioned about our AI training a couple of weeks ago, the trainer came up with a very interesting anecdote of his. He was in the Bay Area and he was talking to his friends who've been working in the big techs. And he's someone he's not been on social media for quite some time, except I think now he's on LinkedIn. He's not on Facebook. He's not on a lot of other platforms. And he said, it won't be easy for you to get more details of me. And they said, we need 4 things from you. And we'll give you everything about you, which even you would not. And why did I bring this up? The point that you made about input data and output data. When I see a lot of kids use AI as simple as a GPT, what they do is they give a little too much of data, a lot of personal data, which is scary, which is the worry that I have, that we're giving away too much. I've seen people upload critical documents, personal documents, business documents, which are not in public domain, which should not be in public domain. So there is a problem and we need to address this sooner than later before it becomes a beast that we won't be able to control.
Absolutely. And that awareness, not just for the young people, but for the elderly, because there's so much compromising of personal information that happens, which, it alludes to a lot of data privacy conversations. The whole architecture of how the world is being built around us is very,
Absolutely.
very vitally important. And the conversation needs to happen right now. We're already late. I want to come to the importance of diasporic communities in today's world. On the one hand, we have the local population, doing what they're doing, but there's a big diaspora component of population in anywhere in the world. And you, in your role as the Wiki director in the UK, you published an interesting report that highlighted the contributions of the Indian diaspora in the UK. One of the things that this report brilliantly did, and I remember reading it, was to move that conversation beyond curry houses, corner shops, and back end offices into serious economic and cultural architecture of Britain. Tell me how this came about and what were the key findings of that report, if you're comfortable talking about it.
So, when I moved to the UK back in 2017, one of the discussions came about how much and what data and what research we have on two things. One is Indian companies, the other is about diaspora. Of course, you and your team were already working on the Indian companies and their impact on the UK economy and what is it that they contribute on the cross border trade and investments. So we thought, why not look at diaspora? Because that's something which was not told well. Also, the contributions by the Indian diaspora probably were never highlighted in the right senses. We were talking, but we were talking amongst ourselves. We were patting each other's backs. Oh, Lakshmi, you did a great job, and Param, you did a great job, and that's about it. But did someone in 10 Downing know what the Indian businesses are contributing and what are the Indian diaspora doing? And are they only opening up curry shops and running corner shops? Or they're actually contributing to shaping the future of that country? And how well have we as diaspora have adopted UK as to be our home, our first home now? Because there's always a conversation about diaspora being the second citizen of a country. The color of your skin, origins does not make you a less citizen of that country. If you're contributing to the economic growth of that country, if you're paying your taxes, if you are making meaningful contributions to building the nation, I think that needs to be recognized. And then, of course, we went to the Indian High Commission. I remember, of course, I should step back. The first thing we did was I went to one of our partner in the report, and I should acknowledge Grant Thornton in this. I went to Anuj, and Chandru was around, who's now, of course, on the other side as a diplomat serving in India as a British diplomat. But we all sat down together and we said, yeah, that's something we need to work on. Let's work on this. And then we went to the Indian High Commission. The High Commissioner openly received this. Ruchi Ghanshyam ma'am was then the High Commissioner, and she said, can you guys work on this and do this? Not just by saying, hey, these are the number of Indians here and this is what we do, but go deep. And what we did was, over the years, we went much more in detail about migration patterns and also on the regional impact that diaspora had. Because it was not just about people living in London, but people living in the remotest of corners who had Indian origins and the impact that we are making, be it in business, be it in sports, be it in culture, be it in education, be it in research. I think it was important for those stories to be told. And that's what we did through those reports.
I remember you and I, of course, we were working on, in partnership, delivering that narrative for India.
Absolutely.
And you see, year after year after year, now the King's Honors, but then the Queen's Honors list was, it always has names of Indian origin. And it makes you so very proud that across different disciplines, you see people making such meaningful contribution. Yet, the diaspora is always seen as an immigrant and not very British. So such reports are so valuable in highlighting the contribution and establishing the importance of having immigrants or populations from elsewhere in any country. I'm going to do a little rapid fire with you now. So I'll ask you a question, and of course you answer. It doesn't have to be one word, but let's see if you can. One industry India is underestimating.
I think the whole industry of climate tech per se is at this point not being looked with the potential that it should be looked at. So I think we as India, as a country, should now look at climate technology, interestingly, in detail.
Interesting. So one leadership quality that's becoming obsolete.
Command and control leadership. or leadership based purely on hierarchy rather than credibility?
Interesting. I think the servant leadership is picking up quite a lot.
Yes.
A country India should learn from?
India has and always and should learn from Japan. For long term industrial strategy and institutional discipline, I think Japan is one country that I look at and I also go to. And of course, sorry, I'm going to take two names. The other is Singapore. For governance, efficiency, and execution, I think one of the best countries that I've been to is Singapore.
Interesting. One book every leader should read?
Again, I'm going to be greedy and talk about two books. One, of course, is a book called The Hard Things About Hard Things. This is a book which is written by Ben Horowitz. This is a 2014 book. It's an excellent book on building a business when there are no easy answers to it. The second, and something very personal to my heart, is Arthashastra by Kautilya. And interestingly, my second book, I didn't talk about the first, but I'm going to talk about my second book here. I'm writing something around it as well currently.
Excellent. We must talk about that book,
Sure.
definitely. What gives you optimism about India right now?
I think the confidence of the young Indians. What I do is I go out, meet a lot of young people. I talk to young people and understand, and their willingness to innovate, build, compete globally. I think that's making me optimistic about India.
Interesting. Very well answered, Param. Very on point. I'm going to ask you one final question. So, you've spent your career sitting between institutions, businesses, government. When history looks back at this decade, what do you think will define India's story?
I believe this decade will be remembered as a period when India transitioned from being an emerging economy to becoming a shaping power economically, digitally, geopolitically. What will make India's story unique is that it is attempting this transformation at democratic scales while balancing growth, inclusion, and global responsibility as well. India is not just India, the shaping of India currently is not just participating in, but it is also driving global conversations as well. So I think that's where India is right now.
Absolutely right. And what a great note to end that conversation in. Very fascinating, this whole conversation, because it reminds us that future isn't built just in, by the government or within boardrooms. It's built in the relationships between them. Thank you so much for joining us today, Param. That was an excellent, excellent conversation. We'd love to
Thank
have you
you.
back
Thank
there.
you so much for having me. I enjoyed this conversation, and I think reconnecting with friends like this and talking about what we could contribute ourselves a little bit that we could contribute and remember those times again. I think it's a good conversation to have.
Absolutely. For me, it was a trip down memory lane, every conversation, every layer, so much blood and sweat and hard work that has gone into it. So may that
Absolutely.
long continue. And a lot of best wishes to you for your future.
Thank you.
For your good work that you have been continuing to do.
And you started with Kemcho, I would say Aujo.
Audio. Great. This is it for today. We will be speaking with another interesting guest, a prominent voice from the UK India corridor at Common Ground, presented to you by me, Lakshmi Kaul, for Global Order. Stay tuned.